Now, in terms of copyright itself, to be protected by copyright, as we know, you have to have a work. You have to have the right creative effort that's actually expended in the work. And the work has to be fixed in some sort of way. And when a work is fixed, that is when copyright arises. It arises on fixation. In terms of these categories, when we were talking to our interviewees and we were looking at what they were actually doing, the question as to whether there was a work wasn't very difficult. And we did see both from the music side and from the dancer side, something that could be called a work for the purposes of copyright. For dance, it seems you might have to have a storyline in order to be a work. And sometimes, you know, sort of it actually wasn't difficult to find the storyline for the purpose of the work in dance. For music, what we found, which was quite interesting, was that those who composed music, sometimes what they thought of as a work would not be what the law said was a work. And one good example actually came from Michael. And the picture is there on the poster. And what Michael did was to write a computer program. And this computer program then made images appear on a big screen, largely in random order. And then Michael had a number of people who performed to these moving images on the screen. Now, the law, you asked Michael what the work was, and Michael said, what's really important to me is that computer program, I think. It's what you have written in terms of the computer program. The law, in terms of that, you know, sort of entire output, would probably rather say, actually, the musical work is the performance as it is being done to the works on the screen. So the law doesn't always match with what people actually, you know, sort of think a work is. But nonetheless, I think we can, you know, sort of find a work in the examples that we looked at. The second criterion for the subsistence of copyright in these works is that there has to be the right sort of creative effort that's expended in the development, in the expression of the work. And historically in this country, the right sort of creative effort has been no more than skill, labour and effort. In other words, a really very low standard of creativity or originality. Recent case law, certainly from the European Court of Justice, suggests that this might have raised a little bit to the level of what is called intellectual creation. But this really, I think, certainly for the types of works that we looked at, does not form a problem. These works that we looked at certainly had the appropriate, the right, and even, you know, sort of beyond the basic level of creativity going into them to be for protection there. And the third thing, of course, is that the work must actually be fixed. And so we had lots of examples of works were fixed. They were recorded, they were filmed. And once upon recording, copyright arises in the work. So a very simple answer from that to the question as to whether, you know, sort of experimental or experiential forms of music and dance are protected by copyright would be that once they have been fixed, if indeed they are fixed, but if they are fixed, recorded, digitally recorded, as we're being recorded today, then yes, copyright arises. But I'll go into a little bit more as what is beyond fixation in a minute. And at that point, I should also say that we did take evidence from some people who are involved with a charitable organisation where they are going out and recording music where it would not otherwise be recorded because there is no market for it, you know, because people simply don't have the money to do it. So there is an awful lot of work that is not recorded because it doesn't have a market, because there aren't the resources to actually go about doing it. And one of the other sort of criteria, or not criteria for the subsistence of copyright, but the thing that copyright law actually does when it says, okay, I've got a work, you know, it is within the right category within the law, it does have the right level of originality, it has been fixed, and the law will then look at it and say, well, who's the author? And it will pull apart a little bit what the work actually is, whether it's a musical work, well, if it's a musical work, and say, well, who has put in the right kind of effort in order to be attributed as an author of this work? And historically, some of the cases have suggested that the performative elements of a work do not count towards authorship for the purposes of copyright. More recent case law has suggested that, sort of the people who do engage in the sort of extempore, the improvised music, which is then recorded, will in fact be seen as authors for copyright. So in other words, the law has expanded its idea of what is important for the purposes of authorship, for the purposes of copyright law, for music. There are still, I think, some of the performative elements of a work that are actually beyond copyright. For dance, we have almost no case law, which is actually lovely because you have a bare canvas, or as a colleague of mine actually said, leave it alone, don't get in there because you'll cause problems. But it does raise all sorts of questions for dance, and I think one of the questions that I've been asking that as we go along is there has been an almost unquestioning assumption that it is the choreographer that is the author of a dance. And yet, a choreographer at least works very closely with the dancers. And the dance will so often look different on different bodies. And at some of our evidence showed that sometimes the choreographer very much placed the dance on the body and knew what it wanted to look like. At other times it was no more than sort of instructions, and the dancer was left much more to develop what the dance would look like. Now, if you go back to the requirements for copyright law, we have the work, we've said that. Is it the right type of originality? Is it the right type of input into the expression of the dance, which is the dance itself, in order for the dancer to be regarded either as a single author or a joint author? Or is that sort of input simply to be regarded as performance and thus beyond copyright? I think it's very much open for discussion. So, as I said, the trite answer, or the obvious answer to our research question, music and dance, experiential forms of music and dance, are they beyond copyright's text, is no. If they're captured, no, they're protected. There's the work, right sort of originality, fixed, copyright arises. But what we found, I think, that is really important in the course of our research, that much of what is important to the dancers and musicians that we talk to is before copyright's text. So in other words, what is important is the process of creation, which is a continual process, and it's before capture, so it is before copyright are the bits that are important for the people who we talk to. And we also have elements of what sort of we saw and we drew from our interviewees, which are beyond copyright. And they're beyond copyright, first of all, in the sense that I mentioned that aspects of performance are often not seen as the right sort of input for copyright. So that is beyond copyright. Or one could argue it's before copyright, whichever way you do it. It's not within the copyright sort of bundle. The other really sort of important and strong element that came through, particularly for dancers, was the interaction, the liveness, the importance of the interaction with the audience. So we had, from my colleague here, Johan, talking about the interaction with the audience. And he said, it has to do with a direct interaction between audience and performer, where the audience actually also become performers and performers' audience. Yes, I think it would be very difficult to get that experience on a video or anything. And also from my, a very powerful quote from Jenny, who's unfortunately not able to be here. She choreographed a dance called Blind Passion. And she was talking about this, and she said, when we had a showing of Blind Passion, a severely visually impaired woman came to watch it. And the best comment I have ever had is, she said, I can't see it, but oh my God, I can feel it. And I think that is the sort of experience that is very much beyond copyright.